Great. We are now recording. So, welcome to the first session of track 3 in the Food and Agriculture and Land Use in the Youth Climate Forum in Cleveland. This session is on food waste, the biggest problem we can solve. And today we have Dan Brown here, who's the co-founder of Rust Belt Riders. Dan started Rust Belt Riders in about 2014 with the mission to feed people and not landfills. They work with businesses and organizations and individuals, across the entire region of Northeast Ohio with clean and timely and community benefiting alternative for food waste that redirects food from landfills. And so they've grown a lot. They work with about 150 businesses and 1,000 residents from, it's been 6 years now. And so we are very lucky to have Dan here with us today to tell us a little bit about Rust Belt Riders model and solutions to deal with food waste.
Thanks for that intro. As was mentioned, I'm Dan, one of the founders of Rust Belt Riders, and we're going to sort of walk you through what it is we do, as well as how we think about addressing climate change through this thing that we interact with every day. And we'll just get into it. So there's this elephant in the room called climate change. Given current emissions levels, we're on track to have a 2-degree rise in Celsius, which to be really glum about it, would pretty much change everything we know about society today. It would produce hundreds of millions of climate refugees. It would put great strains on democratic institutions. It would produce food insecurity and basically change life as we know it. And so the unfortunate thing is that there's a 95% likelihood that we will see a 2-degree rise in Celsius before the end of the century. And I think that oftentimes when you read about climate change and the solutions to climate change, they're very often like pie in the sky, inaccessible things that lead people to feel like they can't do much of anything in their day-to-day lives to make a meaningful impact. The example I usually give is, I've been fed, and I think a lot of people have been fed this idea that in order to be perceived as or viewed as an environmentalist, somebody has to drive a Tesla or install solar panels or somehow erect a wind turbine. And I think that for most people, those solutions are unfortunately inaccessible. And so what we're excited about and the work that we do and we'll be sharing with you is how simple everyday actions, both at the household and business level, can really help to reshape and reframe what climate action looks like. And in doing so, hopefully reconnect relationships that have been severed due to a really global food system that often doesn't work for the vast majority of people. So when we got started, this report came out called Project Drawdown, which its subheading is the most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reverse global warming. And the author kind of jokes because he can make that claim because there never was a report about how to reverse climate change. And so it was both the first, but also the most comprehensive. And what they sought to do was to change the narrative away from all that's wrong. I think we're perhaps to a fault, keenly aware of all the causes of climate change, right? Where it's impossible to ignore the forest fires out west. It's impossible to ignore pollution and waste and excess, but very little attention, I think, is given to where solutions lie. And we at Rust Belt Riders really seek to focus on the solutions rather than the problems, because we are surrounded by abundance, the challenge of climate crisis is a human produced product, which is at once hard to hear, but it also holds a solution, right? In that people and humans can be the ones that solve it, right? If we created this problem, we are the ones that have to undo it. So what this report sought to do was to look at where do these potential solutions lie, and they took an industry or sector-based approach to looking at where can CO2 and carbon emissions be greatly reduced, and what sectors ought we be looking at to conceive of solutions. And much to their surprise, food and agriculture holds the greatest potential for drawing down carbon and mitigating our impacts on the planet. And for someone who grew up sort of first being introduced in a popular way to the idea of climate change, I watched An Inconvenient Truth made by Al Gore, and there was curiously no mention of food or agriculture. And it was all focused on wind turbines and solar panels, and those solutions are really important. But as I mentioned earlier, I think often really inaccessible to do the kind of coalition building that we think is necessary to get every person in everyday actions to see themselves as contributing towards a more sustainable and regenerative future. And so when you break down the sources or levers within the food and agricultural space, in terms of potential impact, reducing food waste is the leading opportunity that we have, in terms of drawing down carbon and in mitigating a rather broken food system's impact on the climate. And I think that comes as a surprise to a lot of people, because for people who are looking at lifestyle changes, often, and very deservedly so, the vegan diet or a plant-rich diet is I think often the thing that is led with a direct correlation to how somebody's diet might be able to impact their own personal carbon footprint. But interesting to note is that you can be eating a plant-rich diet but end up throwing away a lot of food, and in throwing away a lot of that food, be undoing a lot of the gains that you had made by adopting that kind of diet. And so that stat really surprises a lot of people. For food waste to be that big of a lever, it has to be pretty significant. And to me, it really underscores just how broken and in need of dramatic reform our food system needs. And so just in the United States alone, the EPA estimates that about 40% of all the food that's grown within the United States will end up being thrown away. And yet just 4% of that material will ever be composted or avoid going to landfill. Obviously, food and other compostable material is the single largest component of what comprises our landfills. And that just is insane, right? I think we can all conceive of recycling. And it's fraught with problems as well, but we try to not send aluminum or glass to landfills because we know inherently that you can recycle those things, right? You can make new aluminum cans or planes or other consumer goods out of aluminum when recycled. Similarly, glass can be recycled back into glass. But for some reason, food has never seen the level of infrastructure development that plastics, glass, and aluminum have seen. And yet food is perhaps far easier to be recycled than any of those other commodities. And so all of that is important to note, but just on like an ethical and on a sort of emotional level, right? It's kind of abhorrent because we have in Northeast Ohio, 1 in 5 children who are food insecure. So there's lots of talk given to how are we going to feed the world in the future or even today. But when you look at just how much is thrown away, it's clearly not necessarily a problem of production, but instead a challenge of equitable distribution. And so we're really on a mission to make sure that food never goes to landfill, because food is inherently a resource that can achieve a lot of compounding good when used and handled appropriately. So to put some of those larger numbers into perspective, what does 40% of all food look like? Well, you could fill Cleveland Browns Stadium every single day with the amount of food waste that's generated in this country. And it has massive economic cost as well. Essentially, $218 billion is spent annually on the growing, transportation, and disposal of food that's never consumed. That's 1.4% of the entire economy of the United States is just spent on waste. So whether you're an environmentalist who's concerned about the impacts of food entering landfills, whether you're an ethicist and is concerned about food security, or just a staunch fiscal conservative, there is an opportunity here for you to get involved in mitigating the way that we handle and dispose of food in a more regenerative and positive way. So you might ask yourself, who are all of these horrible people who are throwing away so much food? Well, according to ReFed, which is a national leading think tank on looking at solutions to food waste, they found that roughly 43% of all food waste occurs at the household level, while another 40% occurs at businesses and 16% at farms. So for us, what this told us was that we need to work with businesses and households. Given that we live in a city, those are the people that we have most immediate and direct access to. And so if we can help them capture and redirect their food from going to a landfill, we can begin to turn the dial on that 40% of all food and the harmful impacts that this waste produces. But you might sort of be scratching your head, like, how do households produce that much food waste? And I think some examples of my own life are illuminating, right? If I'm going grocery shopping, for example, and I see some arugula or spinach or greens on sale and it's buy one, get one free, right? I'm very likely to buy two, but I might not need to, right? So I might very well get through one of those containers of lettuce, while the other one that I thought was a value will end up sitting in the back of my refrigerator and rot. And if I don't compost at home, or if I don't have the ability to divert that material from going to waste, it's going right to the landfill. And so, our daily lives are filled with hundreds of instances of these kinds of challenges, whether it's eating a banana in the morning or an apple core for lunch, at lunch, right? What are you going to do with that banana peel, and what are you going to do with that apple core? Because that means and matters a great deal. And so we try and work with people to think about and look at their food not as something that can or should be discarded, but as a resource that really ought to and needs to be recycled if we've got a fighting chance to combat climate change. And then, of course, there are businesses, right? So as you can imagine, restaurants feed lots and lots of people. Coffee shops make lots and lots of coffee. And all of that material, when not paired with a service, has to be thrown away. And so we think that the kind of infrastructure and development that makes sense in the here and now and moving into the future is to provide services and build out the infrastructure so that as waste, quote unquote, waste occurs at businesses and at households in cities, there are services that are able to help residents collect and move that material to a more proper and suitable home, namely a composting facility or anaerobic digester. So that food can be given a second life and a second chance to make food more accessible, and in turn, hopefully strengthen our food system and reduce food insecurity. And all of those have positive spin-offs on public health, on water quality, on air quality, and it to us just seems like a no-brainer. So we look at the current landfilling model of use one, purchase, use once, throw away as a linear system, right? It goes in one direction and it ends there. And then you build a landfill in somebody's community and it becomes their problem. But what we're really advocating is that we need to think about the economy of the future as being circular. And so we don't really think that we're going to build a healthier, more prosperous future by fighting the existing reality of the linear system, but instead we want to build a new one that is so attractive and so inspiring that it makes the landfilling model seem archaic and obsolete. And so that's really what we're trying to do at Rust Belt Riders. We work with businesses and organizations to provide a handful of services. So a lot of people are accustomed to seeing, recycling containers and recycling bins, both in offices, at restaurants, and in parking lots. Well, we provide a similar service to businesses, right? So we give them containers. They fill those containers up with food waste and any other compostable material, and then we collect it and then transport that material to nearby community gardens, urban farms, and composting facilities to ensure that that material avoids going to landfill. We also do zero waste events. So we've worked with a lot of these aren't happening right lately because of COVID, but just for example, there's a wedding happening this weekend, and the bride and groom said that we want to celebrate our union by having a positive impact on the environment. And so we were working with them to make sure that all of the meals are served on compostable plates. All of the food waste that's generated is collected then by us and composted. And so we do that kind of work with a wide variety of businesses or event types, ranging from film festivals to outdoor summer festivals to fundraisers and birthday parties. But all of that work, the work with our businesses and with events, isn't possible unless we're doing the training and education necessary to allow people in the food service industry, as well as home cooks, to really understand just how easy it is to segment your food waste from your landfill bin. And so we get to work hands-on with these folks to really better quantify and measure the impact that diverting this material will have if they implement a program like that. And so we have a data tracking dashboard for all of our clients that allows them to track in real time the amount of food waste that they've diverted through the use of our services. We're able to calculate the greenhouse gas emissions that have been avoided through the use of our services, as well as the amount of compost that has been created through the use of our services. And these are data points that are often used to market their business as being eco-friendly. It's a tool that improves employee retention. We view it as an upskilling training program for the hospitality industry, because the leaders in this space will be composting either by law or by public pressure. And so for those chefs that know how to do this work and are able to train their colleagues on it, they'll be able to move up in the ranks more quickly than those who do not. And so in terms of services that we provide to residents, we've been in business for about 6 years, and only for the past 2 or 3 years have we been offering any services to residents. It honestly wasn't really a focus of ours at first, but over time, more and more people reached out to us to say, the place I work composts with you. Can I do that at home? Or my favorite restaurant composts, and I'd like to do that at home. And so the idea is now, not only can you support businesses and organizations that are composting, but you can take this practice into your own hands. whether or not you have a yard, whether or not you know anything about composting, by using one of two of our programs. And so the first program that I'm going to talk about is our community drop-off program. And so it's a subscription model, very similar to like joining Amazon Prime or some to-your-door meal delivery service. You pay a monthly fee, and you're able to collect your household food scraps and then drop them off to a secure and clean bin across Northeast Ohio. So we presently have 8 drop-off locations across Northeast Ohio, on the west side, on the east side, on the south side, and we're eagerly adding more to make these drop-off locations as accessible as possible. Our ambition is to have at least one in every community across Cuyahoga County before the end of next year, and it's our hope that this becomes so convenient and so accessible that we won't necessarily need some policy, which is often really a long, drawn-out process to take place, because we feel like we don't have the time or luxury to wait that long. And so we're very eager to see this program expand. But in doing that program, we've also learned that people are growing accustomed to the same-day delivery kind of model, the stuff coming right to your door, that Amazon Prime type of service delivery. So just earlier this year, we launched a to-your-door weekly pickup service. So if you can think back to a time when the milkman existed, which was before my time and probably most of yours as well. It's this idea that we will give you a 5-gallon bucket that's lined with a compostable bag to be kept in your house, next to your recycling can, next to your garbage can. And as you're making meals or making coffee, you have the real easy opportunity to just put it in that bin. And when you put it in that bin, you're able to see in real time just how much food waste occurs in spite of your best efforts, right? There's lots we can do to minimize food waste through better shopping patterns and meal planning, but a lot of times food waste is just an inevitable process of eating. And so we try and bring that into people's homes. And when we do that, we want to make it as easy to use for folks as possible. So once a week, residents will put their bin out on their front steps or wherever is convenient for them. And then we come by and we swap out that full bin for a clean, empty bin, and they get to keep doing it all over again. And so we really try and, for both our pickup and drop-off programs, not only provide a service, but provide educational resources and opportunities and community building experiences so that folks can meet with other people who are like-minded, share best tips and tricks, and things like that, so that we're building a community and changing a culture that really values food, not only from where it's grown, but how it's disposed of. And then we also offer some fun perks on the soil that we make, which is what I'm going to talk about now and speak about how it relates to the climate crisis. And so we're a startup, right? So if you've watched Shark Tank or seen any shows like that, it's always starts off with what if I told you I could do blah blah blah, and it's some magical thing, right? We're in the business of picking up what most people look at as garbage and making soil, and it's often not the most glamorous thing in the world. But this quote, I think, is really kind of amazing. So there's a magic machine that sucks carbon out of the air, costs very little, and builds itself. And so, what is that? Well, it's soil. Soil is this magical thing. And it's also the thing that holds huge potential for mitigating our impact on the climate. And so to step back and talk about why food waste generally has as big of an environmental impact as it does, you first need to know about the difference between compost and landfills. So when food enters a landfill, it doesn't have any access to oxygen or moisture, and it is perhaps the most unnatural environment that humans have ever created. And when that happens, food emits and other organic material emits a really potent greenhouse gas called methane. And so methane is roughly 75 times more harmful than the stuff that comes out of our tailpipes, and has a much more toxic half-life, meaning in its first few years of production, it's even more harmful, that it's compoundingly harmful. Now contrast that with what happens in nature, right? If a tree branch falls, if leaves fall in nature, in forest, those break down naturally, and that's basically what composting is. And so when in our daily lives these businesses generate lots and lots of food waste, it's not reasonable for urban communities to just leave their garbage out on their tree lawn and hope that it'll break down, because humans have inalterably changed our urban landscape, and our rural landscape for that matter. And so composting is like the human activity of mimicking nature. And so the way that you make healthy compost and in turn make new soil, you need to follow basically three simple things. You need to have your ratios correct. And what that basically means is, like, think of how you would make a cake, right? You got to follow the recipe. You need the ingredients to make it work. And so you need 3 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen. And sometimes talking about the periodic table can be confusing, but to translate that, you need 3 parts wood chips to 1 part food scraps. So for as many pounds of food waste as we collect, we also need quite a lot of wood chips. And we partner with cities and tree trimming companies to get our hands on all sorts of leaves and wood chips to balance out our compost piles. And so if you have that ratio, you're off to a good start. But beyond that, you need to make sure that you are maintaining moisture levels, which is basically when it gets too dry, you need to water it. And when it gets too wet, you need to add more carbon to dry it out. Because what's happening inside a compost pile is you're basically creating a habitat for microorganisms to basically thrive and reproduce. And their reproduction generates heat, and their reproduction helps to expedite the process of decomposition. And so if it's too wet, you might drown some of those microbes. And if it's too dry, they're not going to have enough water to survive. And then the last thing that you need is to make sure that the whole pile is getting air. Because again, these are microbes, right? They need air just like you and I do. And the way that you incorporate air into a compost pile is by turning it with a shovel or a pitchfork, or in our case, we have some big pieces of equipment that act like a rototiller and mix it up and ensure that every part of the pile has access to air. And if you can do that, you can make some really awesome soil. And so just last year, we started a side project called Tilth Soil. And we make these really cool potting soils and potting mixes in the hopes that we can get this product back to some of the businesses we pick up from and some of the residents who use our services. And so the idea is that we have this full loop, full circle, right? So if we pick up your food scraps and we turn it into potting soil, and then you get that potting soil back, you're much more likely to grow maybe a tomato or a cucumber or some zucchini or squash. And in that way, you're far less likely to need to go out and buy some vegetables because you get to grow some yourself. But oftentimes, what people are trying to grow their vegetables and herbs in is really highly compacted soil. It's often soil that is quite literally dead, right? Because we're interested in microorganisms, right? They're alive. They're quite literally living. And so our soils are alive. And a thing I like pointing out is that, if you were to go to Home Depot or Lowe's, you often are buying soil in a bag that is made of plastic that is heat sealed, right? So what kind of bacteria or microorganisms do you think could live in an environment with no oxygen, right? So the odds of you buying a product, like a big box product, that's going to give your plants a really good start to their life is unlikely, because a lot of these products are just pumped full of artificial chemicals and fertilizers to boost nutrient levels when nature just does that itself. And so we are specifically designing these soils to help make growing your own food a lot easier. And so that's the thing that we're really, really excited about these days. And we anecdotally have known that we've got some really good soil, but just to be sure, we've been sending it out for testing. And so this was a report from the University of Kentucky. And so they concluded that the soil that we're making is among the best potting soil in the country. And we're only about 2 years old. So this was some pretty welcome news to our ears. We knew that our products were good because we were using it. One of my colleagues, Nathan, always says that, how do you know if your soil's any good? Well, you got to ask a plant, right? So planting it. And so we've been doing side-by-side trials of our soil versus soil that you could buy at Lowe's versus some other specialty soil. And we're always continually trying to improve our soil to be better and better and better. And I think that we're really on the cusp of something exciting because our soils are doing really, really well. And we're just very excited to get that into the hands of more people. So a lot of people are familiar with this idea of farm to table eating, right? There's a lot of very good attention being given to knowing where your food came from, whether it's GMO free or organic or cage free. And so that's known as the farm to table movement. Well, what we're here to do is help to bring about a table to farm movement, right? So if we can put your food scraps and the food scraps of schools and businesses to work, we can support farmers to do the work that they so desperately need to do. And if we can provide them with really, really good soil, they've got a much better chance at making a good living, a good livelihood, and making healthy, nutritious, and accessible food way more abundant at a time when it's needed. And when you do that, you help to minimize all those harmful impacts on the environment. You create jobs that are inherently place-based and can't be sent anywhere. And you're building a new economic model that is the exact opposite of the linear landfill model that we've grown accustomed to. And we think that what we're doing can inspire a whole new set of business models that really look at resources in a holistic sense rather than in a transactional sense. And so that's what we're up to. I've got some contact information here. I invite anybody to check out our website, follow us on Instagram and Twitter, or shoot us an email if you've got additional questions. I'm also happy to share this presentation with the organizers so that they can get that out to you. And it's also being recorded. So I'll stop rambling and would welcome your thoughts. Yeah, I know that we got like a kind of smaller session, but if anybody, I'd be happy to just sort of riff or chat and see what your thoughts are.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Dan. That was awesome. And it's been so great to see, what Rust Belt Riders has done for the past few years. I remember when you guys were first starting, I saw you guys at the Ingenuity Building in Cleveland,
Yeah.
And it's been super exciting to see how much you guys have grown and how really food waste and land use has become such a big part of the climate conversation.
Yeah.
Olivia, do you have any questions or want to chime in, or I'm also happy to ask some follow-up questions.
Actually, quite a few.
Sure.
So I'm on campus at Case Western, and I'm in the process of starting, or it's already started. Not quite a business, but a free store. And so we've got that going, and it's really awesome. But I'm kind of curious how you've marketed yourself to reach out to the more hesitant person, I guess. We've had, lots and lots of students come through with, I think the most basic marketing tools, but I'm kind of curious, like how you've reached out to spread yourself further than, the initial step.
Yeah. I mean, I think the early on, the doing the work was the marketing, right? Where there wasn't really anybody doing what we were doing at the time. And so simply by being out in the world and talking about what we were doing was exciting and got people jazzed and on board. but that only gets you so far, right? So I think what we've always wanted to really position our customers and our clients as the heroes in this story, right? We're really proud of our team and the work that we do on a daily basis, but it's really, that work is only made possible by an amazingly supportive community. And so when we think about the kind of future that we want to see, it's one of collaboration and partnership. And so when we can put our clients and our partners at the head of a lot of what we're talking about, we get access to their network, and we get access, and they become our spokespeople, and they become the people that are evangelizing and talking about our services for us. And so I think that was like probably part number 2 of our evolution. And then, we're onto some more unique challenges now that we are offering residential services, because I think we took for granted the network that we thought we had. And so we've really found a lot of success in partnering with community-based groups, block clubs, community development organizations who are often viewed as like trusted figures in their neighborhood, to help create buzz and awareness, and while still remaining like a deeply personal organization, right? I think that we want to be as approachable as possible to as many people as possible, but oftentimes you need a personal introduction to be greeted by people. And then in terms of our soil products, right? That's like our latest challenge, right? The analogy I give almost to a point of absurdity is, you didn't know that the beer you were drinking was bad until you had like a craft beer. And, you don't see Great Lakes competing for the same customers as Budweiser, right? And so we're really trying to figure out who our future clients will be to buy our soil, while also recognizing that, like, I didn't grow up on a farm, right? We know a lot about soil, but farmers, there's a weird little small Venn diagram of where our work overlaps with farmers, and yet so much of the work that we're doing is in an attempt to support and honor farmers, right? And so we need to do a lot of trust building and relationship building to be viewed as a trusted resource for farmers. And so we've been going to a lot of conferences, doing a lot of farm visits, trying to like meet and listen, do a lot of active listening so that the products we're making are relevant to them. So yeah, I mean, we also do the social media stuff, but we think that those relationships have been like our secret sauce.
Awesome, thank you. And then I'm actually a Rust Belt Rider consumer. I I compost with you guys, and I do the drop-off program.
Awesome.
Since I'm
Which
in
location?
college. And I do it at the Shaker Lakes one, the Shaker Lakes Nature Center. Yeah. But I'm constantly moving around, so the drop-off one is better for me. But I was kind of curious if you guys have considered switching your pickup one to doing like every other week or like once a month, or if there have been thoughts about things like that.
Yeah. So one of the things that we've learned through doing this work is that so we really lead with this idea that like composting can be clean. And so in that way, we've found that if material sits around for longer than a week, it can get pretty rowdy pretty quickly. But then on a more like practical business level, right? The predictability of scheduling and running routes when it is volatile week to week makes it just poses a really significant challenge. And so those are like two reasons. I think that the other thing that we're aware of is that we're not the first organization to do this. So we're part of a national organization called the Community Composters Coalition. And so there's about 100 organizations across the country, and we're always sharing best practices. And I think that a repeated lesson that we've learned is that some businesses offer every other week service. Like there's a company in Chicago that I'm aware of that offers once a month service and every other week service. And I think that we've been interviewing these people and asking like why they do it and what their experience is like. And I think that at the end of the day, we really want to be customer forward and centric, but also respect and honor the people that are picking it up, right? The even material that's been sitting around for a week can be sometimes not the most pleasant thing to move around. And so we're also wanting to cultivate a workplace that keeps our team here. And I think that every little thing you can do to get the ick factor out of composting is a net win. All that said, I don't think that we haven't written it off that we wouldn't move to less frequent service. We just feel pretty strong in our convictions of weekly service.
And then kind of on a different scale, what are your thoughts on like bioplastics or like PLA and things like that?
Yeah. Oh man. It's a hairy topic. I think that to sort of talk about it from what it's attempting to displace is a place I really like to start, right? I think that we need alternatives to single-use plastics. And I view what PLA and compostable products are is a transition technology to get away from single-use plastics. It is not the solution. It is, I hope, very temporary. And I hope that more conversations around PLA and compostables spurs innovation to see business models that allow people to use durables or permanently reusable products, right? So that's the thing we're actively working on. We're teaser. We're going to be launching like a zero waste store, hopefully as soon as permits allow. And this idea is that we don't want it's still the compostables business model is often very linear, right? It's manufacture, use, and then hope that you find a composter that will take it. But often that doesn't happen, right? Like something like 95% of all compostables never get composted, which is totally defeats the purpose, right? And it's just as bad to send to landfill as your banana peel. And so in that way, right, we want to support this industry that's building bridge technologies, but we want to continue to push it. And I feel like we're in a better position to push that conversation when we're at the table. Now, all of that said, it poses significant challenges to the composting operation itself. We certainly have the ability to compost this stuff, but for example, the brand of soil that we make, Tilth, is approved and certified for organic use. Any compost pile with a PLA plastic in it or any compostable product cannot be certified organic. And so it quite literally has like a bottom line cost to us. So we have got a pile with PLAs and compostables in it, and then we've got a pile with just food scraps and vegetables in it. And we can sell this one for one amount, and we have to sell this one for another amount because the way unit economics work. And so, we're biased because we can make the best soil possible when we exclude that material. However, we also recognize that for a lot of our clients on a residential level or commercial level feel drawn to using compostable products for, I think, very legitimate reasons. And we want to be able to provide them as robust a service as possible while removing as many barriers as possible.
Okay, I know that we're running out of time, but I've got one more quick question. Sweet. So I know that you have big events that you will work with, but for those big events, are you the ones that are providing like the utensils and things like that? Do you suggest suppliers? Like, have you ever considered doing like having your own supply of plates or something and having them rent those out and I'm kind of curious how that works.
Yeah, that was one of the sort of moves we made in COVID. Was we decided that, you know, a lot of our restaurants in particular are moving to takeaway, and a lot of them were like, "Hey, we're using this product. Is it compostable?" And we said, like, let's take all the guesswork out of it. And it's like, if you're going to use compostable products and expect us to compost them, you're going to buy them from us. So we'd spent a good amount of time vetting a few different manufacturers who make products, and so there's two that we work with now. So as people want to do events, those orders flow through us rather than us outsourcing it to people who may recommend a less than compostable product. But also, yeah. So, and I also think that it helps to minimize contamination, because when you begin incorporating compostable products, the opportunity for contamination just rises dramatically. And so, so the more control we have of our own supply chain, we feel like we're in a better position to both educate and just be viewed as a resource. So